Hello there. Welcome to another Ascension with A Course in Miracles. The reason that I call this Ascension with A Course in Miracles is because humanity is ascending to a new level of consciousness. We are rising up from the immature, childish ways that we have been operating, which is from fear. The ego at a very young age begins to understand how to manipulate the world. And it does so because it experiences fear. It experiences not being loved by mommy and daddy or aunt or uncle or grandpa or whoever it might be. At a very young age, a child's mind is impressed with information that uh, does not facilitate the expression of the soul. It is impressed with information about survival. And if we operate in survival, we are always going to be in a state of fear, fight or flight or freeze. So humanity is ascending. We are moving up through those levels of consciousness, but you have to do the work. You've got to look at the fears, at the resentments, at the judgments, at the why you manipulate others, at the why do you believe that you're not good enough? Why do you believe somebody else has your goodness, or somebody else completes you, or somebody else has your abundance? It's because you don't remember the truth of who you are, that you are an infinite creative being. All of us have fallen under the trance. Even Jesus fell under this trance, but he did not fall so deeply into the trance, even though he was believing things that were taught to him by, well-meaning people, parents, mother, father, teachers, uh, uh, preachers, rabbis. But he had a conscious mother who knew that he was here as a child of God. He was here to express the truths of God, not what we were taught about God, like it was back then in the old Jewish teachings, but what is actually true directly from God, which is that we are all loving beings. We are all powerful creators of our own reality. So we have been descending. Humanity has been little by little descending, forgetting. That's really what we need to understand. To descend is to forget. How far down have you forgotten? Are you 99% asleep in the dark, forgotten the truth of who you are? Are you 50%? Where you forgot 50% of the truth, but you remember 50% of the truth? Are you operating at 75% of truth? So this is what we're ascending to, remembering more of the truth that is true and will be true forever. So here we are in as I said, August 30th, 2023. We're in the decade, the 2020 decade is a decade that is a timeline for us to really finally wake up or remain asleep. We've got to make a decision. This is the decade where you have to choose. Are you going to remain below the line asleep? 50% remembering, that's wonderful. But you're choosing a timeline where fear still has 50% power over you. Or are you choosing a timeline where you are remembering more of the truth and you are behaving like one who knows the truth? Your walk and your talk match. See, so many people who are spiritual, I know this because I know it was my own personal experience. So many people who are spiritual talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. And if we are not walking the talk, then we are caught inside of an illusion. We are operating in our mind. We know truth, we know spirituality, but we don't feel the truth in our hearts because fear has created blocks to that truth. And this is why I have been on a mission. I've been teaching these things for 20 years, but the last couple of years, since we entered the decade 2020, I am on a mission to help those who consider themselves spiritual to walk the talk. You can't just talk it. I know I did for many years. I would say things and still have fear running my life. Or I would be judging people for not being spiritual enough. Well, how spiritual is that? If I'm judging somebody for not being spiritual, I'm not being spiritual enough. And you know what? It's not about being spiritual. It's about being spirit. is about allowing spirit to guide us. It's about operating from a level of consciousness and honestly acknowledging that that is the truth, not only of who we are, but it's the truth of who everybody is. See, if we think that we are spiritual and nobody else is, we're trapped in the ego spirituality of judgment, of projecting on another what we are unwilling to see within ourselves. And that is going to be a very rude awakening for many spiritual people, is that we talk it, but we don't walk it. And to be able to get to the place that we are walking it, you have to understand that every irritation is an invitation. Anything that bothers you, that annoys you, that irritates you, that pushes your button, I don't care what terminology you use, if you lose your serenity, if you're not at peace, it's because you're projecting a piece of yourself out there that hasn't been integrated in here. That means if somebody if you're bothered by somebody because they don't eat the same things that you do, or have a different politics than you do, or see medicine in a different way than you do, or you're bothered by what they wear, or you're bothered by whatever it is that they're saying, or you're bothered by, it doesn't matter what you're bothered by. If you are affected by anything that's happening in the world, meaning it is activating in you a reaction, that is how you transcend your ego, because the ego projects out there what it doesn't want you to see is in here. So as we study A Course in Miracles, it is filled with exercises, practices that if you do them, if you take them to heart and you make a commitment, I know this is what I did when I began to feel the guidance of Jesus as early as 2002, when I began to feel this angst after my mom passed, and I was feeling this fear, this dread of dying and going to hell, like I knew she would be in, because I knew my mother and she was quite the sinner, as sin, as I understand sin. And when she passed away, all of those fears that had been instilled in me as a young child about, be good or you're going to burn in hell, they all came up. So that irritation was an invitation. At the time, I did not know that that was my initiation into the spiritual awakening. I had no idea. I went to my therapist and I tried to deal with my fears, and she did the best that she could to try and help me, but she never told me that I was eternal. She simply told me that, I needed to get comfortable with the fact that death is part of life and that it's just normal. So I was basically being soothed into believing that there is a normal process of death, which is true. It's part of the 3D experience, but I was not being given the tools about my eternal nature and how to utilize the fears that were coming up around my mother's death as a mirror of the fears that had been instilled in me as a Catholic, with a Catholic upbringing. Meaning I needed to see inside that I did not know truth. So as we continue to move through this decade, more and more things outside of us are going to irritate us to help us see all the lies that we have been believing. If something bothers you, if something upsets you, it's because you don't know your power. You are giving power outside of yourself. So to know your power, you must become like a little child. We've got to go back through our timeline as a human and look at the places where we picked up misinformation. We must go. In my Monday night class, I drew a picture of like a movie strip that has all of the different scenes that when you run it the olden way, now they don't do it that way, but you run it through a projector and you project out there each scene. And when you do it really quickly, then it looks like it's all animated and it's all happening in sequence. Like if it's real time, but it's really still frames of the movie that were created. We have to go back to the beginning of the movie called Your Life, My Life. We've got to go back to the beginning. And the beginning is not when you were born. The beginning is when you decided to create the movie. You've got to move back to where you were beyond your physical incarnation. So this requires that we understand our nature, our true nature, our God-given nature, where we are eternal forevermore. We are not only eternal, but we were created whole and complete. There is absolutely nothing that is missing, that is wrong, that could possibly alter who we are, except for the mind that gets conditioned into believing what is not true. What now I have come to understand is just a bunch of nonsense. And it's nonsense because it makes no sense when you begin to wake up and you realize, well, if I'm eternal, why does the Catholic Church teach about fear or death or fearing death or sins or punishment? Well, that makes no sense. If I'm eternal and God doesn't judge, and even the Bible has stories of the prodigal son where the father doesn't judge whatever things the son did, no matter what path those sons took, the one that was well behaved and the one that was, well, a little bit of a misfit and went off and did his own thing. God, that father treated them the same way as our father, God, mother, God treats every single one of us. So if what is true is that we are whole, complete, eternal, and what is a lie is that we are not, well, that's nonsensical. That's nonsense. You can call it plain old nonsense, made up, but it was made up for a reason, to give us the experience of separation. And there's nothing wrong with having an experience of separation, having bodies, thinking that you have children and you have grandchildren and you have brothers, sisters, friends, lovers, old lovers, new lovers, past experiences, new experiences, that you have a house and that you have money, that you have a cat and a dog and a yard and whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, there's everything right about that. We took on a physical vessel, like an actor takes on a role to play a part in a movie, to have an experience that expands our awareness of all that God has created in infinity. See, God is infinite for a reason, because there's no limit to what God creates. And the idea of being a human in this incarnation, well, not just this incarnation, but in the 3D realm of consciousness, is for the experience of believing nonsensical things. That's all that it is. Just because Brad Pitt plays a role of a murderer doesn't make Brad Pitt a murderer. It just gives Brad Pitt the opportunity to play a role, to feel like what it would be like to be a murderer and experience being evil like that, and then experience maybe being caught and then going to jail and maybe repenting, maybe not. It gives Brad Pitt an experience, but it doesn't make Brad Pitt a murderer. And right after that murder movie, he goes on to play maybe another character. And I don't remember all the movies that he's played in, so I'm making these up. Then he goes on to play a role as a warrior that helps people, that is loving and benevolent. So to me, actors are actually a projection of our own acting out. And we're acting out specific roles to give us more aspects of who we are. Because you see, you cannot know all that is possible with just one lifetime and one perspective. So we have had many lifetimes, many, and over lifetimes, specifically here on planet Earth, we have been descending in consciousness down to the places where we are in a very low frequency collectively. But now there is a turning around. Some of us have ascended and we're in various levels of our ascension process. As I said earlier, all that means to ascend is to remember. Do you remember 10% of the truth, 20% of the truth, 80% of the truth? So you are expanding your awareness of what's possible. Ascension is not just going up, it is widening out, seeing more and more and more of what is true. According to God, the ego's role in our 3D world is to have us forget more and more about what God is so we can have the human experience. So it's a good thing to incarnate, have an ego that helps you ground yourself in through forgetting in the human experience. So you could say that for the human experience, the ego plays an important role. It's the role of making you feel and think that you are separate from everything else so you can play your part. That is important. However, the ego is not meant to lead you, to be your master. The ego is simply an aspect that we have to help us forget truth so we can play the role. If we are raised by conscious parents, they understand to separate what is true from God and what is egoic. And it's just like your script. As an actor needs to remember, he's Brad Pitt and this is the role. So then you play the role, but you don't identify with the role as being all that you are. You know, when this role is over, I'm going to play another role and another role and another role. Or at the end of the day, I go home. At the end of filming, I go home and I'm in my house as Brad Pitt, not as the murderer, murdering my children, my family, my wife, my whatever. So we have an incredible opportunity right now to see more clearly what Jesus taught us 2,000 years ago. Love God. But to love God, you got to know God, which means you got to see what you got programmed, what was scripted into your written into your script, conditioned into your script by the powers that be, the teachers, the preachers, the government. They gave you a script. This is what you're supposed to believe. Well, if God is love and the Bible teaches to fear God, these things don't match. Two things are not, they're not matching. Remember that game when we were little where you find two things that are like the other and you match these two things and you match these two things? Well, a God of love as taught by Jesus doesn't match so much of what the Bible teaches about fearing God. And I'm not even going to get into so much of what it in the Old Testament about a wrathful God that wanted the firstborn children to be crucified or all those crazy things. You have to use common sense. That's why it is nonsensical to just believe the lies. And we have all fallen into that trap, and we have all created lives based on lies, starting with the lie that you and God are separate. And, that starts it all. But then that you're separate from everybody else in a really fear-based way. We are utilizing this timeline right now to wake up to the truth. And to wake up means to begin to remember more of the truth. And you don't just remember all of it by yourself. Some people do. I had a spontaneous awakening in 2007. After 5 years on my journey, I had this moment of transcendence that for about 45 minutes, I was totally, completely with God, as God, knowing myself as all that is, having an experience that till this day, 2007, 15 years later, till this day, I am still experiencing more of the truth that has been unfolding because it was so much. Once you know all that is, a mind that has been locked down into very limited knowingness cannot accept all that isness. My heart did. My mind has had to take time to unravel the frames of my life, to go back through those frames, to go back through those stages and meet myself at the place where my ego took over and made up stories. So I've got to go meet myself, retrieve my soul, reconnect with the truth of who I am. And when I do that, when I did that, and when I help my clients do that, what happens is that when you're sincere, now this is not just, oh yeah, I'm going to go and do that. Oh, now I see, whatever. There has to be an honesty and integrity that you are now 100% committed to what you know is true to be your truth. But so many of us, and I see this so much in the spiritual community, we go back and we go, oh yeah, so-and-so hurt me, but I forgive them and that's done. But then we are reacting today to situations and we don't realize that the reaction is because you really did not fully integrate the forgiveness at those early stages, because it is the forgiveness that the Course in Miracles teaches us that sets us free. It is the forgiving ourselves for forgetting the truth of who we are and buying into the nonsense. So all those irritations are invitations to help you see where you're out of alignment with the truth of who you are, made in the image of a loving God, here to be a lover, to be one who extends love. And love looks like kindness, gentleness, compassion, honesty, saying I'm sorry very quickly, because you know that you don't want to be right about anything. You want to be happy, because that is our one purpose, is to be happy. So as we are on this path, this 2020 decade, really, the clock is ticking. And this is not a bad thing, by the way. So if you are aware, like I am, that you have to make a choice, you cannot sit on the fence. We cannot operate with love and fear. We have to pick one. And if we don't pick one, guess what? Fear is going to win. Because as long as you allow an ounce of fear to have power over you, that is going to create the timeline that you're going to be bifurcating into. And that doesn't that sound like a crazy word, bifurcating? But bifurcating just means splitting. We are splitting. In the 3D realm of duality, love and fear have coexisted because we are bringers of love and light to a world that the ego has made that is nonsensical, that is divisive, that is filled with fear, with lack, with resentments, with judgments, with abuse. That 3D world that allows for that, well, it's just necessary. That's where the love and the light of God come in to illuminate the darkness. That 3D world is going to continue for people. And what all that means is that those who have a consciousness that accepts duality, that accepts separation with fear, are going to continue to live out in that timeline, experiencing fear, reacting and being righteous. They are making a choice to have that be something that they want to continue to experience. Those who make the choice for only love is real, for I am getting off the fence, I am either shitting or getting off the pot, and I'm getting off the pot. And when you get off the pot, when you get off the fence, whatever metaphor you want to use, and you make a commitment to being only love, every irritation is an invitation. It's a call for love to come through you. And if you don't first in love, you love yourself enough to understand that I'm not as expanded as I thought I am. You're gentle with yourself, and you take every irritation as a gift. Oh, I just judged that presidential candidate. Oh, I just judged my daughter. I just judged what my, neighbor did. What does that say about me? Because when you make the commitment to be only love, it starts with self-love. You love yourself so much that you're gentle. Oh, wow, there's a reaction. Let me see what that is projecting that that I'm unaware of. Because if you project it out there, you're projecting it to dissociate from it, to say they have it, but I don't. So as we continue down this path of making a choice for only love, it is a time of brutal honesty. This is why so many people, Course in Miracles tells us that. I've seen that in all of my years, almost 2 decades of teaching. I see the people who progress and make the commitment, and it doesn't mean that it happens overnight. I've coached, I've got one client now. I've been coaching her for almost a decade, and it's not been too long ago when she finally realized that every choice had to be made from love. It took me time. It takes time. But when we make that commitment, then it has to be 100%. And if you are honest with yourself, as I had to be with myself, every judgment means that I wasn't 100%. So that day, I did an assessment of my day. I did an evaluation. Okay, where was I out of alignment? And I was super honest about it back in the days when I used to journal. I don't journal anymore because I'm not having to do that much work on myself. It's very quickly. corrected for me when it happens now. But back then, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I would write down, oh, I reacted to my husband, or I reacted to my child, I reacted to a coworker. I would write it down. And then I would go through what I had written down and look at, what was I believing about them? They're not telling the truth. They're not being kind to me. They're wanting to get so much attention. Where does Laina not tell the truth? Where does Laina is not nice enough? Where does Laina want attention? And I would sit, and this is a beautiful thing that happened for me, that can happen for anybody. It's available to all of us. I would ask for guidance. I became very aware early on, a couple years into my journey, that I couldn't look at things objectively, because I was always looking at them through the perspective of my programming, through the perspective of my ego. So I went to Jesus. That was the consciousness that I felt comfortable with, and it was showing up in my life. So I would connect with Jesus. Okay, I'm seeing that I'm projecting these things on other people. Where have I lied? Help me see where I've lied. And boom, I got taken to, oh, do you remember this time you told a white lie? You remember this time you told a black lie, or red lie, or whatever lie. Lies are lies are lies. We say white lie because the ego loves to justify its dysfunction. So as I went back and took an assessment of all of the places that I had lied, when I went through every screen and I saw the lies, I went back to the first lie. And the first lie was believing that I was separate from God. That is, when I made the decision to incarnate, I also made the decision to forget that I am eternal. So in my incarnation came the process of separation, which is what the ego is all about. So I had to go back there and say, all right, ego, we're not going to live from that lie that I'm separate from anybody here. I need to correct that lie. So that lie then is the first and primary lie that we have to look at, that you're not one with God. And then the next lie, that God is not love. So I was lying to myself that I was separate from God. And then I had to look at, why do I feel separate from God? Because I was taught that God is to be feared. Well, that's not true. So then I began to ask for guidance. How do I remember that I love God? How do I remember that God is loving? And my gosh, the books began to show up. Some fell out of bookcases. I fell off of a shelf in a bookstore in Atlanta called Phoenix and Dragon, landed right in front of me so that I would see about the love of God. And as I read that book, I began to understand the love of God that Jesus was talking about. And I began to then give myself permission for that to be the new truth instead of the lies, to fear God. So the more I began to really expand into the loving aspect of God and to learn more the truth about God, which took me down a path of quantum physics, because God is consciousness, God is energy. Once I got clear and I accepted that as 100% the truth, then God ceased to be this father on a cloud with a beard, sending down wrath to anybody that did harm. I began to have compassion for all those who fell under the lie, who were living out the script that somehow we were supposed to fear God. So I began to experience a relationship with God and began to see everything, as A Course in Miracles says. God is in everything I see. I began to look at everything in me. I began to love everything, to realize God is in this lamp. God is in this computer. God is in that ceiling, in this chair that holds me. God is in everything that I see. So I began to train my eye to look not through the physical eyes, but through my third eye, to see the eternal essence of God in everything. The more that I did that, the more that I began to feel this spaciousness inside of me. So here we are in chapter 30 of A Course in Miracles, of the text, talking about a new beginning. The new beginning is comes after the final ending. So for there to be a new movie, we got to be done with the old movie that we were playing out. So the new beginning is understanding the truth of who we are. If we are not willing to accept who we truly are, we are operating in insanity. We're operating in nonsensical information, giving us permission. And I hear so many spiritual people talk about love and light. That's all well and good. But are you operating with the faith, as we studied in the Monday night class, perfect faith in what that means? Meaning that if you know your love and light, why do we entertain fear? The only reason at this stage of somebody's journey, if you've made a decision for only love, the only reason you entertain fear is because it is still showing you something that needs to be seen, that is hidden within you, that is part of the old script. So if you see that fear, that reaction as an invitation, that irritation is an invitation to see the ego's motivation. And you see your ego, as my ego, is motivated by holding on to lies that were taught to us by other people's egos. And this is a very uncomfortable thing for us to admit, that our mother, our father, our beloved grandmother, our beloved grandfather, our special aunt, the government, our favorite teacher, that they lied to us. That's very, very difficult to accept. But they did. But here's the thing. You forgive them. They didn't know what they were doing. They really did not know. The average person does not know what they're teaching is not, what they're teaching is not true, because they learned it from their beloved mother, father, teacher, preacher. So we've got to trace this all back to the beginning. We've got to get to the place where none of that existed. And it didn't. This planet, the 3D planet called planet Earth, is the only planet where the ego has taken hold and has been running the world for thousands and thousands of years. And the more that we begin to see systems crumble, the more that we allow those lies to crumble within us. But they're going to activate fear. If you think that the Social Security department that you've been sending money to for all these years was going to keep you safe and protected, financially secure, and now it's crumbling, that it's not going to have funds, is whatever the media is telling you, then you're going to have fear. There is the invitation. That fear, my safety comes from the outside, is an invitation to see, well, I bought into this system that my safety is outside of me. Course in Miracles teaches you are safe in the mind of God because you exist in eternal consciousness. So really, in truth, God is imagining you, and you are imagining you're separate from God. That's all that is happening. Waking up is realizing that we have been imagining something that is not true to have an experience as a human. Nothing wrong with that. What a ride. We just, as I've said in a different one of these transmissions, we bought a ticket to go into the amusement park and we entered the haunted house. It's okay to have a human experience filled with fear, because that is what you wanted to experience, so that you could have the contrast to say, I'm done with that. I'm done living in fear, done living in lack, done living in separation, done living in righteousness. I am done living in judgment. I want to live now in the abundance of knowing that I am the creator of my reality. But we can't go on to create our new reality while you think the old is your reality, is true. So how can we live in a government that is benevolent, that is really here in service to the people, to we the people, by the people, for the people? You've got to unplug from giving power to the old system. How do we operate in a system of education that teaches the child, actually is not teaching the child, is allowing the child to express itself, and the teachers of the education system are there to guide the child to utilize all that abundance of energy and the imagination that is coming forth to be utilized to craft their life experience in authenticity to who they are, not to tell them that, stop daydreaming, stop imagining, pay attention. And if you don't pay attention, I'm going to send it to the principal's office. I grew up back in the days when we would get paddled. If we were daydreaming, looking out the window, daydreaming, you'd get paddled. The teacher come and swat you, throw the eraser to you. Nowadays, can't do that. But anyhow, last week, we read one of the most beautiful passages, and it was telling us, this is in chapter 30. We're still in section number 5, which is, let's see. No, we're still in section number 3. Goodness. Yes. Section number 3, paragraph number 8, that the thoughts of God are far beyond all change, mean they're eternal and shine forever. They wait not birth. They're not waiting to become reality. They are ultimate reality forevermore. They wait for welcome and remembering. And then it goes on to tell us that God holds a thought of us like a star, unchangeable in an eternal sky. So high in heaven is it set that those outside of heaven know not it is there. Yet still and white and lovely will it shine through all eternity. God holds an idea of us like we are, it's the stars, shining, lovely, forever, not waiting for you, the soul of you, the real you, to be birthed. No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is God is simply a loving source waiting for you to remember who you are. You don't have to try and figure out what you want to become. Our role in awakening is to accept that we are already lovely, pure, amazing, innocent, eternal, and creative. The 3D world is our co-making. We have made it because we agree on all the things that are nonsensical that we have given power to. So the new earth is the co-creation of those who agree, no, we're not going to buy into others telling us what to do with our body. No, we are not going to give up our power that God gave us. We are sovereign. We are our own authorities when we align with God. And when I and the Father are one, love is all that comes through me. So when we all operate this way, do you really need government? Do you really need to be at war with anybody else? No, you communicate, you collaborate, you co-create. But to do that, you cannot at the same time be in fear. So the bifurcation that is taking place, the getting off the fence, is a choice that you have to make to either accept that you are 100% eternal, not just a little bit. If you're going to accept that you're eternal, then you can't be in fear of death. You cannot be in fear of the body getting sick. You cannot be in fear of lack. You cannot accept fear as your reality. Fear, when you're waking up, is a guide to show you where you still block truth within yourself. So the next paragraph says, such a beautiful paragraph. So who knows? The Father knows this light, for he is the eternal sky that holds it safe, forever lifted up and anchored sure. Who knows the Father? If you know the Father, Mother, God, if you know truth, let's call it that, if you know the truth, capital T, the capital T truth, if you know the truth, not the made up truths that we have been operating from that are lowercase t, if you know the Father and you know the truth, who knows that knows this light. You are the light, accepts that you are here as a bringer of love and light. And you recognize that God is the eternal sky that holds your brilliance as a shining star, as a shining light. See, we have been taught through so many different forms to become confused with nonsense. When we talk about movie stars, and those stars, they deserve more money, they deserve to be applauded, they deserve to have an event with a red carpet. They deserve to make all this money and have all these designers give them all these beautiful outfits that cost tens of thousands to the average person. Well, the average person can't even buy one of those things. So we have been trained to worship the movie stars. They're stars, but you're not. So through this delusion, through this nonsense, we have all forgotten that we are stars. We are the star of our own movie. We are the movie star. Everybody is a movie star. One is not better than you. They're acting out, and you go see it on a screen to make you think that only they pretend, so you don't realize that you're pretending not to be a star, so that you think that you're pretending that you're just, this poor person down here that will never achieve that status. No designer is going to send you a $10,000 gown. So we have created this illusory idea of hierarchy that puts others on a pedestal, and you're not on it. And this is part of the awakening process. Again, if it irritates you that a movie star has that status, look at what you're projecting. If you worship that movie star, as we're seeing, that who thinks that they are better than you, and you're idolizing them, and maybe they don't even think that they're better than you, but you think that they're better than you idolize them, which is what section is, beyond all idols. Then you have to realize through projection, you're sending it out there. They can be stars, but I'm not. Yet the creator, Father, Mother, God holds you as if it is the sky and you're a star in it. Another way of saying that is, in the infinite mind of God, you are being imagined. You're a point inside of the mind of God that's eternal, goes on forever. I say this only because of the camera, but it's really eternal, beyond. I cannot stretch my arms wide enough. So we are having to cultivate a new relationship with God, come to know the real God that Jesus taught about, but it's not the God that was in the Bible before. Jesus came to bring us correction, to say to us, this is the truth. Love God, because God is love. Then when you know that God is love, you will love your neighbor as yourself. Because when you know God is love and you're made in the image of God, then you know you are love. Now loving your neighbor is easy because you came to love yourself first, because you accept who you are as a child of God. You are the star of your life, but that star came in with love and light to extend it, to share it. This is why it's so important that we understand the truth. So we are anchored and lifted up forever in safety. You're eternal. Your soul goes on forever. But if you're identified with the role that you're playing, you're going to suffer when that role comes to its conclusion. And it has to come to a conclusion. My God, I don't want to be the same 3D Laina forever, eternally. I'm ready for this role to have its completion. And until then, I'm going to play it out fully, knowing the truth of who I am now, which is what makes me one who is awake, and awake in the dream. I realize that I'm still in the dream of separation, but awake in the dream, according to the Course in Miracles, is extending only love, is extending only gentleness and kindness. And when I don't, then I correct it quickly, because I don't want my mind to be deceived into the fears that are so common in the world. But when I get impulses, when I get intuition, when I get guidance to act on something, I must do that, because if I don't, then I know what the repercussions are. If I don't act on what I am being guided to do, I am going to experience fear. So, and all of us are at whatever level of consciousness we're at. So if you're in a relationship with a partner, your husband, your child, or whatever it is, and your consciousness and their consciousness is not the same, you're processing things from different levels of truth. And what might be true for one at 10% truth and 90% fear is not going to match. It's like you're having conversations that don't make sense, because if you're operating at, let's say, 30% truth and only 70% fear, you're seeing things that they are not seeing, because if they only have 10% awareness of truth and you have 30%, you're seeing beyond what they can see. So your level of peace is a little greater than their level of peace. And they're going to be operating with 70% fear to your or 90% fear to your 70% fear. They're not vibrational matches. And this is where people get into an inability to as a couple be able, or any kind of partnership, be able to communicate and connect, because we're operating at different levels of fear, different levels of truth. So what can be guidance for me won't make sense to somebody who that they're not ready for that level. And the way that I like to look at this, because it is not that anybody is better than the other, it's like grades in school. A kindergartner, somebody who is totally, completely unaware of what happens at the mastery level, master's degree, PhD degree, they cannot comprehend the formula that this somebody who understands that is speaking. So we have to meet people wherever it is that we can meet, where we can find common ground. And if you are attempting to bring people more to the light, and they are more invested in living in fear, that's not a loving thing to do, by the way. To try and pull somebody out of where they're at is not a loving thing. To meet them where they're at by acknowledging where they're at, but not going down there, is a loving thing, because then you hold your truth and you become an example of one who has accepted, I am eternal. I am the creator of my reality. This is the reality that I want to create. You can join me or not. And then if they don't, they don't. And then you forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. We've got to get really clear about that. As one who is awakening, we're awakening to just more truth. We're accepting, and that truth makes you more peaceful, makes you more easily able to receive guidance and operate from that place where you are being guided to navigate your way out of the insanity of the ego-made 3D world. Because the 5D world is not going to show up over there and we buy a ticket to fly there and then boom, we're in the 5D world. The 5D world is created by each and every one of us being the change we want to see. If you want to operate with trust, then you are living in that state of trust. That is what creates the new earth. And then people who are trusting, you connect. People who are not trusting, we're going to be vibing out of each other's spheres. That's just the way it's going to happen. We are just going to move because we're not in resonance with one another. So this continues to give us this beautiful information about God. Because how are you going to ground yourself in the power that you have and love God and love yourself so that you can love each other until you know what God really is? Well, Course in Miracles helped me understand God by telling me the truth of God. God is this eternal, is as eternal as the sky will always be forever. And you and I are like the stars shining there. So don't get bamboozled into believing that there are only some people who can be stars here. All of us are stars, either shining our light or blocking it. And if we're blocking it at certain stages of awareness. If we're shining our light, we're shining it at certain levels of awareness until you are fully accepting the truth of who you are, and you shine without needing permission from anybody. You just shine fully, completely. But you're operating in a movement that is happening intuitively within you. Your mind is not planning, plotting, trying to keep you safe and protecting you and figuring out, is that going to be safe? Is that's because then you're projecting into the future the fears that have run your life based on past experiences. This is why we have to go back through every frame of our lifetime and restate it, reframe it. We have to correct the misperceptions that we have. And instead of looking at life at that time through the ego's immature child's fears, we need to look at it through our eternal soul's knowingness that we are playing a role. Nobody did anything to us that affects our soul. Things happen to the body. Things were said, things were done, they happened. But if your ego takes that to then react to that, and you live your life in protection because of what happened to you, you're not letting your soul shine through. You're operating in protection mode. You're defending, you're attacking. You're believing that you are in a hostile world, and all your moves are very calculated by the ego, not intuitively, spontaneously happening based on your soul's knowing. So it goes on to say that it's perfect purity. This is the truth of who you are. Its perfect purity does not depend on whether it is seen on earth or not. A star's brilliance does not depend on whether we can see it in the night sky. Most cities have so much light pollution, as they call it, they can't even see stars. Doesn't mean the stars are not shining. It doesn't mean your soul is not there and shining, waiting for you to let it out. It just means that you're believing the ego stories and it's blocking you're remembering your light. So then everything appears dark, appears sinister, appears like it's out to get you, appears like it's dangerous, because you're not operating with your light as that giant flashlight shining the path for you so you can see what's in front of you. But you can't move about making decisions and navigating the world no matter what is happening. You know, these new vaccines are coming. I can guarantee you that many spiritual people who believe that they create their own reality and they've subscribed to all of these teachings from Abraham, from Dr. Bruce Lipton, are going to run in fear to get the mask or get the shot. And then they are going to let you know that you're not being loving enough if you don't take this shot to make them safe, that you don't care about others. Look at the projection, meaning I don't care about others. I need you to make me safe, means I'm not safe here, means I don't know God, means I don't trust my ability to be the healer of my own body because I'm the writer of my own script. So the truth does not depend on you accepting it. It is, on you believing it. It is there. It is only waiting on you accepting it. Had a little sniffles here lately. So as it says in here, the purity of your light is held in God's infinite self as the sky holds a star. Your knowledge, your purity, your goodness, your love is already there waiting for you to remember. Wake it up. Let it come forward. Stop operating from your immature, wounded little child that is attempting to protect you, but it is holding you, behaving like a child, making decisions like a child. That's why we look at the news and we go, my God, this 80-year-old politician, 60-year-old movie star acting like a 3-year-old throwing a tantrum like an 8-year-old. Well, that's because the ego that runs our lives is an immature child, stuck in time, frozen in time, even today as a 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 90, 100-year-old person, making decisions from a very immature, fear-based place. And if you don't use those fears as opportunities to get honest, why am I afraid, and question that, you cannot wake up, because you're giving the fear power to protect you, but it's not protecting you. It's imprisoning you in the matrix of nonsensical, made up stories. That's why it takes so much courage and so much determination to wake up, because you got to change your patterns. You've got to first get so willing to know the truth of yourself, understand who you are as a child of God, created in the image of the Creator to create. You are creating your own reality with fear or with love, with lies or with truth, with protection and safety or with freedom and sovereignty. Those are the only two options. And if you don't feel safe, if you're afraid of your decisions, if you're afraid of making the wrong moves, then you're not listening to God. You're not listening to the creative source that is moving you in the direction that is so important for each and every one of us who wants to wake up to move toward. We're moving out of limitation, but not if you don't make the decision to stop operating in the egoic limitations that are, living in a box, living inside of craziness, crazy fears. The next sentence is, the sky embraces it. This is talking about that star, that light. The sky embraces it and softly holds it in its perfect place, which is as far from earth as earth from heaven. And of course, when you read this, you have to understand the sky is talking about God. The light is talking about you. So the sky, God holds you, the light, the star, in its perfect embrace. And it is so far from the ego's ability to hurt it or affect it, but the ego can block it. The ego can tell you something that you believe that has you block the truth of who you are. So we're peeling what is true from what is false so that we can see very easily the voice that wants to guide us into freedom, the voice that keeps us in fear. They're happening inside of you. But until you know God and you know that God created you perfect, whole, and complete, and you own it, and you own your power, and you question every thought that you think, because that's what writes your script, you are not in your sovereign freedom. You are still operating as a scared 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old. It is not the distance nor the time that keeps this star invisible to earth. But those who seek for idols cannot know the star is there. So that star that is in the sky, held in God's embrace, is going to be forever there shining. We here on earth can not see that star because we're blocking it with all the pollution that we've created. We're blocking it with our distractions, with all these idols. So I've got to go see this concert, and I've got to go to this show, and I've got to go do this thing. And I'm so busy with all the things here. I got to, I can't go have fun because I got to wake up early and go to work and blah, blah, blah. We have created so many distractions here on the lower planes, the levels of existence, fear-based planes, that we can't take the time to go out and see the brilliance in the sky. My move to Colorado has been absolutely amazing in so many ways. Not only do I get to be with the greatest teacher that ever could be, which is a 2-year-old, to sit in the presence of pure love, pure light, just expressing itself. But in the night sky, when we don't have clouds obstructing the sky, the lights of the stars is absolutely magnificent. It's spectacular. I prefer to be watching the stars than to go to a concert and distract myself with the flashing lights. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we have created so many distractions from the real light that is shining as a star, meaning a metaphor. The light that you are is totally, completely, always, forevermore, will be there eternally, shining brightly. Are you distracted by the flashing lights of the dead, or the flashing lights of a movie, or the flashing lights of a lover, or the flashing lights of a paycheck or a promotion or whatever out here? Are you creating idols outside of you? Are things outside of you more important than your acceptance of the truth that you are, always have been? If you don't use the irritation as an invitation to see what distracts you from your own inner light, then please acknowledge to yourself that you're not as advanced on the journey as you might think you are. As we studied in the Monday night class, my mastery group, the spiritual ego is the last egg to be cracked. Meaning, if you don't get honest with yourself and acknowledge where you talk love and light, where you talk that you trust that all is well, but you still operate from fear, you are not going to get out of this opportunity in this decade to choose only love and create a new timeline for yourself, where who you're going to be attracted to are people who operate at the level of consciousness. Now, there's nothing wrong with letting fear run your life, nothing wrong, but then admit to yourself that you want more of the 3D experience that is fear-based, that is idol-based, that is externally based, and you're more comfortable there because you're not as comfortable with the truth of your total freedom and your total power. When we state that to ourselves, and this is something that I had to do when this happened for me, like around 2012, 10, 11 years ago, where I had to acknowledge, I am teaching about love and light. I am teaching about sovereignty. I've got my son doing drugs. Potentially, this child may not make it to tomorrow. If he overdoses, I won't see him tomorrow. Am I operating in fear? Then why am I teaching that I'm eternal and being in fear that he may not be here on this planet for much longer? If I'm in fear that he's going to die, then I don't really believe, I'm not walking my talk, that the truth is that he's eternal and so am I, and we'll never not be connected. When you get super honest with yourself and you question every single thing that comes out of your mouth or that you think in your mind that activates fear, when you question it and you say, am I believing truths or lie? And you can be honest and say, you know what, I'm believing lies. When we have that experience that we are honest with ourselves at that level, something alchemical happens in you. Now, the voice for God, the voice for the Holy Spirit realizes that there is a you that can tell the difference between lies and truths. Now, that you, that is the presence of awareness, that is now aware of two voices, that you now can be guided by the Holy Spirit more easily because you will internally go to that voice, that intuitive guidance in you, instead of listening to the voice for fear. And it gets faster and faster and faster to the point that you don't have to go meditate about it. You actually feel it in the moment. You operate in the now, in integrity with the voice for love. But we are not able to align with God and only God and listen to loving thoughts only until we're honest that we let fear run our lives. That level of honesty is crucial. I call it radical honesty. Until you acknowledge that you choose fear, because every time you make a decision from fear, it's because you're choosing it. Nobody's choosing that for you. Nobody's choosing for you to believe lies. You have to choose it. That's why it's so hard to wake up from the world that the ego has made, because nobody wants, I know I didn't, wants to admit that you are in 100% control of what you believe. We say it, I create my own reality, but then we're in fear and we don't see that we are creating the reality based on fear. If you're afraid of the government, if you're afraid of a virus, if you're afraid of the IRS, if you're afraid of the banking system collapsing, if you're afraid of those things, you want to experience those things that you're afraid of. And the reason you want to experience them is because you believe that those have more power than your freedom, your abundance, your peace. Because if you wanted to experience peace, then you would choose not to believe that your peace comes from the outside, your safety comes from the outside. And again, that level of honesty requires a level of not only integrity, but it requires a level of real maturity. You've got to stop acting like a conditioned child, believing nonsensical, childish things that were taught to you by people who were operating at their childish levels of fear instead of their mature levels of consciousness. Because if they were just passing down hand-me-down beliefs that were nonsensical, then they did not know that they could exit the matrix. They were in the matrix trying to make it as, as pretty as possible, like rearranging the furniture on the Titanic as it's going down. Nothing wrong with that. But if you want freedom, if you want sovereignty, you've got to give up fear and looking for safety outside of yourself. So with that, we complete this lesson. This is transmission number 118. I always am amazed at how I have no idea what's going to come out of me, what's going to get transmitted through me, but it does because you're here. And thank you for those of you who joined us at various levels of the conversation. Please, if this makes sense to you, share it with others and let us spread the truth. We're all creating our own reality. Get honest about what reality you're giving power to, because the time for the choice is coming to an end pretty soon. At the end of this decade, we are going to lock ourselves in to the frequency that we are choosing to make our reality for the next go around. My understanding, the next go around is another period of 26,000 years. That's a lot of incarnations. If you live 100 years, that's what, 2,600 incarnations? I don't want to incarnate one more time in a world of egoic made suffering. Not for me. So I've got to get honest. Am I really operating in alignment with God? Then that my future incarnations are going to be with those who are operating in that frequency, and love is going to be our reality, not fear. Thank you all so much for being here. If you want to unmute yourself and share, if you got any nuggets, that would be great. If not, as always, it's okay. By the way, next Wednesday, we will not have a gathering. I am so blessed. I've got some of my best friends coming to Colorado, and we're going to be hanging out in Vail for a couple of days, and that's super, super exciting. So I'm going to play with my girlfriends. So we will not have a gathering next Wednesday, but this one, we'll come back and watch this one if you need a dose of transmissions for the Ascension through A Course in Miracles next week. Love you all so much.
Your hair looks good, girl.
Oh, I just got it cut.
Looks adorable.
How to play with it. Thank you so much.
Who's coming next week?
I've got quite a few friends, Mary and Susan. Well, I actually, this is recorded and it stays there in YouTube. So I rather share it with you privately.
That's so fun. Enjoy.
It is going to be a lot of fun. Oh, and Ginger says, thank you. Beautiful. I'm loving this. Got a scoot. Have an awesome time next week. Yes, thank you. You guys are amazing. Stay totally, completely in integrity with yourself. Tell yourself the truth and all will be well. All right, everybody.
Good thing.
Later.
Love you. Take care.
Love you, honey. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, y'all.